This is the 2021 Isuzu D-Max. It's all new and there are a lot of changes with this new model. A few of those are specifically tailored at bringing more off-road ability to this breed. We're talking a locking rear differential, we're talking improved ground clearance, and we've got an updated traction control in this system as well. To keep this D-Max honest today, we've brought along one of CarAdvice's favourite four-wheel drive utes. It's the Ford Ranger. It's one of the best in the segment, and that includes off-road ability. So it's going to be a really good test to see which is the better out of these two. We've got a couple of hill climbs just over the back there, and they're of varying difficulty. The hills are steep, they're shaly, and they're rutted. So it's going to be a really good test of things like traction systems and general clearance. And we'll find out today which of these two utes goes the furthest off-road. Let's go. Our D-Max is top specification X-Terrain, which has a launch price of $58,990 drive away. The Ranger Wildtrak with a 2-litre bi-turbo driveline is more expensive, working out to be $64,490 drive away. Both are turbo diesel with automatic gearboxes and part-time 4-wheel drive systems. While the Ranger has only 2 litres of capacity on offer, its numbers are superior, 157 kilowatts and 500 newton meters. While the Isuzu can only muster 140 kilowatts and 450 newton meters from its 3-litre engine, peak torque is available across a wider band of revs. The Isuzu only makes do with 6 speeds, while the Ranger has 10 ratios in the gearbox. Both utes also have a low-range transfer case and locking rear differential. They even have the same Bridgestone Jeweler highway terrain tyres in the same size. That's a 265/60 R18, which equates to roughly 30.5 inches of diameter. Who's got the lowest gearing? That's the Ford, with a 47.64 to 1 reduction, beating Isuzu's 33.3. Let's run through some additional numbers. In X-Terrain specification, this D-Max has 23.8 degrees of ramp over angle, 30.5 degrees of approach angle, and 24.2 degrees departure. Now, it's worth noting that's because this D-Max doesn't come with a tow bar standard. Listed clearance for the D-Max is at 240 millimeters and the wading depth has been improved. It's now up to 800 mils. The Ford Ranger Wildtrak has a slightly better ramp over angle, that's 25 degrees, but the approach angle is slightly worse, 29 degrees. And thanks to that standard fitment of a tow bar, the Ranger Wildtrak has a departure angle of only 21 degrees. However, they are both pretty much the same in this test. For illustrative purposes and to put the traction control systems of these two utes under some proper stress, we've kept the tyre pressures for both the D-Max and the Ranger at their recommended factory inflation. There'll be more details on this later. Got the Isuzu D-Max approaching our first challenge of the day here. Now the hill's steep, fairly flat to start with, but once you get to here, it gets rutted. I've got Joshua Dowling behind the wheel, and this is going to be a good test. It's definitely going to cross axle. We've got the diff lock off to start with. See how we go. There we go, it's spinning there. All right, that's definitely a no-go, I think. He's going to flick the locker on now. I think he's good to go. Let's see what difference that makes. You can see the rear end there, definitely gripping, but hasn't got enough to pull the car forward just yet. He might have to go back a little bit, get into a slightly more advantageous spot. See, little change in line goes a long way. Through it goes. So a good example there of what a diff lock can do. He was already stuck, so he did have to go back just a couple of meters there to get into a better position. But once he had a little bit of momentum, he was able to drive out without too many issues. So that's a good start. All right, so the D-Max got up there, had a little bit of trouble, needed its diff locks. Now it's the Ford Ranger's turn. Do the same thing, no diff lock to start with. See how we go. Bit of wheel spin there, but he's keeping that steady throttle. He hasn't stopped. That's pretty impressive. Big difference between the D-Max and the Ranger there. He didn't need the rear locking diff. Just got up with the traction control. A little bit of wheel spin there, but it did rein it in much faster and put the torque to the right wheel. Got up without too much trouble. That's impressive. Now, for posterity's sake, we're going to run the D-Max up the same challenge again, just to see if it does need the rear locker. Let's see how we go. Got a bit of smoke off the tyres there, plenty of wheel spin. As you can see, it just hasn't got that fine tune that the Ranger has. Diff lock going in. Joshua tells me it is a little bit hard to disengage the locker. But once it's engaged, let's see how we go. A little bit of momentum, nicely driven, up she goes. The old D-Max would have never done that. Both the Ranger and the D-Max have a rear locking differential, which really helps off-road ability. However, it's evident that Ford's off-road traction control system is superior to Isuzu's. Another advantage is that when you engage the locking differential, Ford keeps traction control active on the front diff. Isuzu doesn't, it turns the system off completely, and that leaves the front end 100% open. What we found was that although the Isuzu would eventually overcome the same challenges that the Ford would, it would need a little bit more momentum to do so. With that challenge out of the way, we thought it was high time to up the ante with something even tougher. More ruts, more steepness, and more holes to negotiate. Cameras never do this stuff justice really, but it's pretty steep and it's rutted and pretty shaly in spots as well, so good challenge for a stock standard four-wheel drive ute. Alright, gentle throttle. That's cross-axling there. That's traction control kicking in. See the light on the dash. Now that's enough for it to work. Up we go, a bit further again. Alright, it's not climbing up there. Put my diff lock on. That light's on the dash there now. Gentle throttle, let's see what happens. Magic button. So good. So you feel it cross-axling, but that rear locker in just takes so much of the hard work out of four-wheel driving. Drop a wheel down here again. Things feels relatively stable through the rear end. It's got a bit of articulation there. The front is always a bit tippy. That's typical of dual cab utes. That's a pretty challenging little climb, done and dusted for the Ranger. Now it's the D-Max's turn. We're going to do the same thing and follow the same lines up the hill. Low range is engaged, but we'll keep the rear locker off until we need it. Alright, off we go. We are climbing. Doing alright so far. This is the cross-axle bit here. That's just driven it. Oh, there we go. Now we've stopped. Alright, doesn't want to go. Engage the rear locker. Start driving, that should engage. There it goes. Alright, there we go. In the end, both utes needed their rear locker engaged to take on that final challenge because of the steepness and the cross-axling ruts. It's worth noting here, we kept our tyre pressures at the placarded number for this test. Lowering pressures is the right thing to do off-road. It makes your four-wheel drive much more capable and comfortable at the same time. However, we wanted to put the traction control systems of these four-wheel drives to the test in this comparison. So we left them at road pressures for both, and we stuck to the same lines and aimed for the same holes wherever possible. And that was to push the limits of these vehicles. While traction control does go a long way for this Ranger, the added benefit of a lower reduction gearing and slightly longer wheelbase pays dividends on this kind of hilly driving. Can't say I'd normally park my four-wheel drive like this, but this is what cameramen get you to do on shoots. This hill in particular has been a great test for these two vehicles. It shows me one thing: this D-Max is a great improvement over the old one. The addition of a rear locker, some increased ground clearance there, has made this much better off-road. I can tell you that the old D-Max would have struggled a lot more on this kind of stuff than the new one. However, it also shows that there is room for improvement with this D-Max. In particular, traction control. Although it is improved in this model, it's still not up to speed with the leaders in the segment. In particular, Ford Ranger. You can see the kind of development that Ford has put into this Australian developed Ranger in terms of that low speed crawling ability. You flick the locker on, traction control still works, you're apportioning torque to all the right places, and the car is incredibly capable. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as we did making it. It's always a good day out in the bush testing these four-wheel drives. Now, let me know in the comments below, would you prefer to take this D-Max off-road for this kind of four-wheel driving, or would you prefer the Ford Ranger? And as always, hit like, consider subscribing to CarAdvice on YouTube, and head over to CarAdvice.com for all the details.